Heide Park is a large amusement park located in Soltau, Germany. Owned by Merlin Entertainment, this is one of two theme parks they operate in Germany, the other being Legoland Deutschland down south. But Heide Park is definitely a pretty recognizable name, especially if you live in the area. A lot of locals who I'd talked to about our big theme park trip in Europe would mention this one. Heide Park personally wasn't one of my favorite parks on the continent, but they do have 9 roller coasters that make it well worth a visit. So in this video, I'll be taking a deep dive into each of their operating coasters and will rank them from my least favorite to my very favorite. Before we get started, I want to mention that Big Loop, the park's Vekoma looping coaster, was closed due to maintenance involving the ride's trains. Now, because Big Loop is such a common type of coaster and would most likely have a pretty obvious spot in this list, I'm going to be including it anyways. So with that out of the way, let's dive into the list, starting with number 9, Indy Blitz. This is Heide Park's smallest coaster, consisting of a helix, a bunny hill, and a turn into the station. The ride is a Zero Force 1 model and a mirror clone of many rides in Europe, including the legendary Dogfart coaster at Bonbonland in Denmark. I found Indy Blitz to run perfectly smooth and give just enough thrill for the youngest of guests in the park. Number 8 is Limit, which is probably the worst adult coaster I rode in Europe. I think there's a point to be made that Limit could actually place beneath the park's kiddie coaster. The ride is a standard Vekoma SLC with the standard bulky over-the-shoulder restraints. Most of the time, I'm not a hater of SLCs. I don't enjoy them very much, but I also don't hate them as much as most people do. But Limit is absolutely an example of a Vekoma SLC that runs so rough to the point where it gives the model a worthy reputation. I think they named it Limit because you reach your limit on the ride. This is an absolutely horrible roller coaster. If you're coming to Heide Park for the first time and don't count coaster credits, avoid this one at all costs. It's not worth it. Number 7 is Grottenblitz. This mock-powered coaster is a very enjoyable family ride. Of course, it's entirely powered by electricity, so you'll be keeping a pretty constant speed the entire time. The coolest thing about this one is when it goes inside this building that it shares with the monorail, and there's a lot of really cool theming in there. You also get sent around the layout multiple times, which is always nice. Grottenblitz is a good stepping stone coaster that's definitely going to be more intense than Indy Blitz, but not nearly as crazy as the park's other rides. Number 6 is Big Loop. As I said earlier, I didn't actually get the chance to ride this one during my visit, but I highly anticipate that it would rank here. It's a very standard layout that I've experienced before on similar rides. You've got your 2 vertical loops and 2 corkscrews, so nothing special at all. It's apparent to me that they keep Big Loop around simply because it is a classic. Now, since it was closed during my visit, I'm not sure how rough or smooth it is, because if it's rough, it could actually rank a spot lower and might be a pretty bad ride. But as far as I know, it doesn't have nearly the same opportunity as something like Limit, so I'm going to assume that 6 is a fair spot for this thing. Number 5 is Crake or Krake. I've heard it pronounced either way. Now, I'll admit, I found this coaster to be very underwhelming. I've ridden many B&M dive coasters before this one, and I tend to really enjoy them. But Crake's layout is so laughably short that it really seems like this was added in just for show. To be fair, this is a gorgeous ride, probably one of the most picturesque dive coasters I've seen. What happens is as you're hanging over the drop, you realize that you're dropping straight into the mouth of a kraken, and that's a super cool moment. So was watching this thing from off-ride, because once it emerges from the kraken, there's also a splashdown that shoots water straight up at the train. But theming aside, the drop is pretty short, the implement is unoriginal, and then there's an airtime hill that gives very little airtime before turning into the brakes. There's really not much to this ride. The saving grace is just that they themed it really well and also made a really well done soundtrack to create a unique atmosphere around the attraction. But layout wise, it probably is one of the weakest B&Ms I've ever done. Number 4 is Bobbin. Yes, I put a bobsled coaster over a dive coaster, but hear me out here. I've ridden many mock bobsled coasters, and most of them are generally fun, but aren't intense like this thing is. The speed and force of this coaster is genuinely impressive, and I did not see it coming. I went into Bobbin with the expectations that I'd be riding a pretty unique family roller coaster, but I'd argue that this is a borderline thrill coaster and one of the park's best rides. The only bobsled coaster I may still prefer is Flying Turns at Knoebels, because that thing is just so smooth and so unique, but out of all the steel ones, this is undeniably my favorite. Number 3 is Desert Race. An Intamin Accelerator? No way, I love rides like Storm Rider and Accelerator and Top Thrill. Yeah, this thing is nothing like any of those. But listen, Desert Race isn't completely a dud. That's why it ranked at number 3 after all. The hydraulic launch taking you from 0 to 63 miles per hour in 2.4 seconds is very fun, as is the low to the ground turns and a couple of the airtime hills. I say a couple though because not all of them really do anything for me. But the biggest problem with this coaster is how there's this anticlimactic trim brake on the final airtime hill that not only eliminates any airtime you may have gotten there, but also results in a gentle crawl to the final brake run. The thing is, you still have a decent bit of ride left, and all of it is ruined and sapped by this trim brake. So that sucked, but at least Desert Race does have its standout moments. The first half I'd say is actually really fun, albeit still nothing too special. Up next at number 2 is Flug der Dämonen. This is the first coaster here that was genuinely fantastic and made me want to get right back in line and do it again. Unlike Heide Park's other B&M, Crake, this layout was not half-assed and has a perfectly acceptable length to it, in addition to the elements of choice being terrific. You start with a wing over drop, which is always fun, and a speed hill, which does give a little bit of air airtime, and there's this really cool sound effect as you're passing through this tunnel of what I'd imagine to be a demon screaming. This is because the name Flug der Dämonen translates to Flight of the Demons in English. What's cool about the rest of the layout is that Flug der Dämonen is actually a bit of a terrain coaster, so you maintain your speed very, very well. The ride also throws in the world's only demonic knot element, which combines two inversions, an inclined dive loop and an inclined Immelmann. The element didn't feel as bizarre as it looks, but it still is very fun and really tops off the layout for me. The only thing I wish they included were some near-miss elements, because if they did that, this would be a genuinely perfect wing coaster. Flug der Dämonen was an awesome ride and one that you should definitely prioritize when you visit Heide Park. But coming in at number 1 is Colossus Kampf der Giganten. This translates to Colossus Battle of the Giants in English, and the park put up this really cool theming of one of the giants tearing up the track at the end of the ride. Anyways, Colossus is one of 4 Intamin prefabricated wooden roller coasters that were built around the world, so it already gets points for being unique. But then you consider the sheer size of this thing, and yeah, it's huge. Nearly 170 feet tall, 68 miles per hour, 4,400 feet of track. These are very impressive stats for a wooden roller coaster. It's to my knowledge that this might actually be the largest wood coaster in Europe. The first third of the layout is reminiscent of El Toro at Six Flags Great Adventure, a ride that has won the Golden Ticket Award for Best Wooden Coaster in the world. It's also personally my favorite Woody as well. It's an absolutely incredible start to the ride with an outstanding first drop and outstanding first few camelbacks. But then the ride just dies. Like, every element from that point onward is kind of pointless. The turnaround, the speed hill, the helix, and the final few bunny hills do so little to improve the ride, and the reason is because you don't have enough speed to make all those elements worthwhile. Even a simple fix like replacing the helix with a 180-degree turn would have made the final few airtime hills so much better. It's just a shame that the middle and the end of Colossus don't hold a candle to the rest of the ride, because the way it began blew me away. Nonetheless, it's still a worthy standout attraction for Heide Park and a great coaster for sure. Along with the first few elements, the appearance, theming, and soundtrack is great. They did a really good job with presentation. Also, the ride is smooth, and that's always something I like, especially because El Toro is really showing its age nowadays. But anyways, there we have it. Every Heide Park roller coaster ranked from worst to best. Let me know how you'd rank these coasters in the comment section below, or if you haven't been to Heide Park, what rides look the most interesting to you? If you enjoyed my list, feel free to give me a like and subscribe because it really does help the channel out. With that being said, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon. Bye guys.